So our next speaker is Sundar Gopal, who is originally from both the United Kingdom and Germany and lives with his wife in Costa Rica. I've known Sundar for many, many years, so many years. He's very, very dear to me. He's lived with me, he's worked with me. We've seen each other in so many situations. His qualities are, he's very gentle, very erudite, very scholarly, yet is able to combine an appreciation for tattva with a real subtle quality for the ras. He's able to combine the intellect with the heart. And he's really starting to take the teaching out to a broader, should we call it the spiritually curious market. He's written 2 wonderful books called the Book of Dharma and Yoga and the Dark Night of the Soul. He's just finished an MA at Oxford University. And I think we're going to see an awful lot more of innovative preaching and teaching coming from him over the next few decades. So I'm very proud to call him my friend, very humbled that he even considers me his friend. And I'm very happy to hand over to Sundar Gopal, who is going to be offering our final glorification of the day. Welcome, Sundar. It's early in the morning there. Thank you for breaking into your day, for sharing with us. Haribol.
Dandavat Pranam Yashodanandan. I just want to thank all the devotees who have organized this event. And I can tell you that there are a certain number participating live, but maybe 3 or 4 times the number of devotees watching the recordings. And this has been a real inspiration and continues to be a real inspiration for all of us all over the world. He Shri Guru Jnana Dina Bandho Swananda Datta Karunaika Sindho Brindavana Sina Hitavatara Prasidha Radha Pranaya Prachara Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First, I offer my Dandavat Pranam at the lotus feet of my dear spiritual master, Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayana Gosvami Maharaj. I also offer my Dandavat Pranam at the lotus feet of Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupad Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj, Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupad Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, and all the acharyas in our lineage. I offer my Dandavat Pranam to all of you, the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis here, and beg you for your causeless mercy. In traveling with, when Srila Gurudev would travel all over the world, in the different places that he would go to, he would often begin by asking some of the leading devotees in each location to stand up and speak a few words about why he has come to that place, why they've invited him to that place. And devotees would stand up and would speak and would explain the condition of our condition in this world, bereft of bhakti, and how Sri Guru comes to deliver those who are fallen. And different devotees would express their particular realizations. And afterwards, Srila Gurudev would continue speaking. So I was thinking the other day that this particular question is especially important, given that this is Srila Gurudev's centennial. Why has he come? What is his unique contribution? Because actually, to deliver those who are in this world, any guru, every qualified guru will be able to do that. And even to attract living entity, to attract us to bhakti, any Vaishnav guru will be able to do that. So what is it about Srila Gurudev that is so special? I'm going to share a few thoughts on this question based really from what I have seen growing up in the international community of devotees, and what I've seen over the decades leading to Srila Gurudev's traveling around the world. So I was born in 1975, and that was the year that my father joined the Hare Krishna movement, and he met Srila Prabhupada in 1977 in France. And then I grew up in Gurukula, and first in France and later in Vrindavan. So there's a few things that I noticed, but I was only able to actually understand and appreciate this in later years. At that time, the devotees in the broader community of Vaishnavas across the world, they did not see any real difference between Brajendranandan Krishna in Braj and any of the avatars, Nishingadev, Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Sri Vishnu, Dwarkadish.
I wouldn't say that. That's what I was thinking.
There was no, Vaishnavas did not really see, across the world, mostly didn't really see a difference. And whether someone worshipped Nishingadev, whether someone worshipped Radha and Krishna in Braj, whether someone worshipped Lakshmi Narayan, there was no differentiation. And then the holy places of Navadvip and Braj, very few devotees knew where those places were, what those places were. There were some devotees who had lived in Braj for a long time. Like you may know Sriman Dinabandhu Prabhu, who for decades has been in Braj. So he would take devotees to some of these places, but generally they were unknown. I remember going to Vrindavan, and there were only 3 places that I knew and that most other devotees knew. And those were Krishna Balaram Mandir, Radha Damodar Temple, and Loy Bazaar. So only later did we, through the mercy of Srila Gurudev, who continued this tradition of parikrama from the time of Srila Param Gurudev and Srila Saraswati Thakur, did we begin to learn about places like Sanket, Paitagaon, Kamyavan, all of these incredible places, Suryakund. Those were unheard of. Even the parikramas who would leave from the temples in Vrindavan, they wouldn't go to so many of those places. And in terms of different types of bhakti, this was something that it was never discussed, that there were different differentiations of bhakti. I remember the first time that Srila Gurudev began explaining that there are different types of bhakti. And he would explain the Dhruva Maharaj, whose bhakti is mixed with material desires. And then this verse, Anyabilashita Shunyam, which defines pure bhakti. Wherever Srila Gurudev would go, he would explain that verse. That verse was relegated to the technicalities of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that no one really read. I mean, we read Nectar of Devotion by Srila Prabhupada, which is the same, but not in any deep way in that way. At least I can speak for myself. But I saw this in the lectures that were being given throughout the world. This emphasis on pure bhakti and what is pure bhakti and what is not pure bhakti was not something that was ever discussed. And how after Dhruva Maharaj, you have the Jnani Bhakta, Prahlad Maharaj, and then Shuddha Bhakta, Ambarish Maharaj, Premi Bhakta, Hanuman, Prematura Bhakta, and then Prema Para Bhakta, and then Prematura Bhakta, and how the gopis of Vrindavan are beyond, they're off the chart. And they have the highest level of devotion for Krishna, and this is what we aspire to. That was something that was unknown. I'm speaking here generally, so I know that there are always exceptions. And as when I grew up, we were discouraged from reading any other books except the books that were available, published by the BBT, books, incredible books of Srila, of Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupad, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And everything is in those books. If you look in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, all the reasons for Mahaprabhu's descent, everything that Srila Gurudev explains is there. But somehow, over those decades, in the 80s in particular, and going into the 90s, these things were hidden, and we didn't know about them, even though they're there. We were discouraged from reading any other books. If one or two devotees were translating some of the granthas of the Goswamis, but it was considered something somewhat, it was considered esoteric and only for senior devotees and generally discouraged. So if anyone was reading a book by the Goswamis, a translation, or for that matter, reading any other book, I remember when I was in Vrindavan, from the library of one of the gurus in ISKCON, I found Sri Guru and His Grace by Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. And I would have to conceal that I was reading that, because it was generally, it would raise eyebrows if you were reading a book that was from outside that community. So, but these books are essential because the Goswamis, our previous acharyas, explain the deeper meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam. We cannot understand Srimad Bhagavatam without the commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, without the commentaries of Srila Jiva Goswami, and so on. And then in terms of the ultimate goal of life, Krishna Prem, Radha Dhasyam. I grew up believing that the goal of life is to extricate oneself, to come out of the cycle of birth and death. And with great respect, I will say that the devotees who taught me when I grew up, they would tell me that your aim in this life is to come out of the cycle of birth and death. But actually, coming out of the cycle of birth and death is mukti, it's moksha. It's not what the Gaudiya Vaishnavas aspire to. So, just as we as individuals were on a journey and we're deepening our understanding, and so the international society, community of Vaishnavas in their different sanghas and groups we are also maturing and developing and coming closer to the teachings of Mahaprabhu. So now when I see this verse by Srinath Chakravarti Thakur, Aradyo Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayas Tadhama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachidupasana Vrajavadu Vargena Ya Kalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam Premam Pumarto Mahan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhur Matamidang Tatra Daro Na Paraha. I cannot help but immediately remember our Srila Gurudev. He taught that our worshipable deity is Sri Krishna in Braj. He taught that the places, confidential places of Krishna Lila are as worshipable, even more merciful than Krishna himself. He taught that the highest devotion is the devotion of the gopis of Braj. He taught that the most authoritative text is Srimad Bhagavatam, as explained by the acharyas in our lineage. He taught that the ultimate aim of life is Krishna Prem, and even more so, servitude to Sri Radha. And Srinath Chakrabarti Thakur says, these are the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I'm not interested in anything else. So we know in the Pranam mantra of Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, it says, Gauravani Pracharine. This was Srila Prabhupada's mission to share the teachings of Mahaprabhu all over the world. And Srila Gurudev would express that he, on the instruction of his dear friend Srila Prabhupada, is continuing and completing that mission. And we see that that is exactly right. Those teachings that Srila Gurudev taught are the teachings that are found in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita as published by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Gurudev brought those out, and I would say redirected, sometimes directly for those who studied under him, but also in many ways by indirect influence, those who read his books, although, in secret, those who heard these teachings from another Vaishnava who heard from Srila Gurudev in so many indirect streams. The direction of the broader community of Vaishnavas across the world has definitely shifted. Now, the books of the Goswamis are published in all languages by all sanghas. That was not the case 20 years ago. Now, I held a workshop with devotees in New York on topics related to attracting people to the path of bhakti. So we were looking at the 4 principles of Dharma as explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. And to my astonishment, devotees who were attending began to ask questions about pure bhakti. They said, I'm reading Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu, and I see that there's a difference between Cheshta Rup and Bhav. To hear that like that from these Vaishnavas, it just, I was, how is this? I was astonished. That was not the case when I grew up. So I think, this particular, what Srila Gurudev has presented and how he has, in many ways, redirected so many Vaishnavas, communities of Vaishnavas all over the world to the essential teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is something that's going to become more clear over the years. Srila Gurudev explained that he looks after his disciples, that a guru looks after his disciples in 3 ways: as a bird, as a fish, and as a turtle. And we have each had the great fortune of being looked after by Srila Gurudev in one or more of those ways. A bird sits on its eggs and keeps them warm and looks after them very carefully. So some devotees have had the chance to study directly under Srila Gurudev in that way, and to have been protected by him for some years in that way. The fish operates differently. The fish looks after its eggs or its young, and then it'll go away, and then it'll return from time to time. So when Srila Gurudev would travel all over the world, he looked after his disciples like a parent fish. And the turtle, the way a turtle looks after its young, is it lays eggs, and then it goes it returns to the ocean. And it protects those eggs by constantly thinking about them. So Srila Gurudev is always present, as Rohini Nandan Prabhu explained. Physically, he's no longer present physically, but like a turtle, we're under his protection all the time. And I want to say that this extends not just to those who have accepted Diksha from him. Also, it extends to those who have accepted Shiksha from him, or his grand disciples. I know that many who are attending this event each week, they're grand disciples of Srila Gurudev. In fact, the grandfathers and grandmothers are more, they have more love for their grandchildren even than the parents themselves, it's sometimes said. Or even those who have who are reading Srila Gurudev's books. Srila Gurudev looks after all of us in that way. What is the easiest way to overcome the difficulties that we face on this path of bhakti? I remember one devotee once was asking Srila Gurudev about that. What's the best way of making progress in bhakti and overcoming the difficulties and challenges that we face? Srila Gurudev replied in 2 words. Just 2 words. The first word was Gurave, and the second word was Namaha. Namaha means not me. All of these ideas that we have in this world, I am this particular person, I have these qualities, we give all of that up and place it at the lotus feet of Srila Gurudev. Before remembering our mantras in our tradition, we recite the verse, Naham vipro nacha narapatir napi vaishyo nashudro. This verse said to be composed by Sriman Mahaprabhu. I am not a Vaishya, I'm not a Shudra, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a sannyasi. That means all of the designations that we have in this world, either by our nature or by our age. All of these designations that we have, Namaha. That's the meaning of Diksha. We offer them into the fire of Diksha, and we take shelter of who? Sri Guru. Srila Gurudev's own life is a perfect example of this teaching. Right until the final moments that he was present with us physically. We have just celebrated the disappearance day of Srila Gurudev. And I want to share a few details about the final weeks and months that Srila Gurudev was present with us. It's not something that I normally speak about, but I only have material vision, so I can't explain things from any spiritual vision. But even from my own limited material vision, what happened, the way that Srila Gurudev, that Leela that Srila Gurudev presented to the world is nothing short than extraordinary. Srila Gurudev would fix his gaze, lying down, he would fix his gaze on a framed picture of Param Gurudev. And looking at this, I could not help but think of Bhishma Dev. I don't know if you know, but Bhishma Dev at the end of the Battle of Kurukshetra, he was lying on a bed of arrows, and he could choose the time of his departure, and he was waiting for that right moment. Srila Gurudev would just fix his gaze on this picture of Param Gurudev and was simply waiting. One of the teachings that Srila Gurudev gave us, and in fact he said that anyone who doesn't know this verse should not call himself a disciple, is the verse Tatte nukampang susamikshamano. So this verse explains that we should understand, we should be very patient and understand that the difficulties and challenges we face in our life are really just the product of our past activities in this life and in previous lifetimes. So Srila Gurudev is not under any influence of karma. So this verse doesn't apply to him. But he taught us by his own example. Tatte nukampang susamikshamano. He is the living embodiment of this verse, Tatte nukampang. Srila Gurudev, in those final weeks and months, he didn't take any painkillers. So for some time, the devotees, and I see Madhuvrat Prabhu is here, who was present at that time, the devotees put some black paste on the soles of his feet, but that was for a short time to try and ease any discomfort. So after that, when that was no longer used, Srila Gurudev didn't use any painkillers whatsoever. He would not waste a single moment. And even during that final pastime, he would be in antara dasha, in deep internal mood, absorbed, completely absorbed. I saw that he would hold his fingers in different mudras, and he would be immersed for hours on end. Sometimes it seemed as if he was oblivious to everything around him. And then sometimes he would say something that showed that he knew everything. He knew exactly where the parikrama was. He somehow knew exactly which date it was. He never wasted a moment, Srila Gurudev. In traveling with him, I was astonished by that, because I always thought that someone who's worked very hard in their life, maybe at the age of 65, after 65, certainly, they retire and they just relax and they take it easy. So Srila Gurudev would travel to various places, like he would sometimes go to Hawaii, but he never relaxed in Hawaii. He would immediately work on translating and on the books of the Goswamis and on Srimad Bhagavatam. And my role was to type up what he would write by hand, to type that up. And there were times when I couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep up in my work with the speed that Srila Gurudev was working at. One time, we were in the Philippines, and some of the devotees who were traveling with Srila Gurudev, they went to go and visit a volcano. Now, I'll be very honest and say that I love volcanoes, and I would have definitely gone. But for some reason that day, I think it was because I had a lot of work. For some reason that day, I stayed behind, and I was typing away. And suddenly I felt this presence behind me. And I turned around, and Srila Gurudev he had his bead bag in his hand, and he was looking over my shoulder and reading to see if what I was typing was accurate. And he said, "So you have not gone?" And I said, "No, Srila Gurudev, I wanted to finish this." And he was so pleased. He said, "We have not come to this place for sightseeing. Whether we're in a beautiful place or in a place full of difficulties, we have only one aim in this life, and that aim is to serve Sri Guru and Vaishnavas." This is something Srila Gurudev focused on often. In Italy, he asked me once to stand up and speak in front of the devotees, and explain the symptoms of Bhav Bhakti as it first emerges. Kshanti ravyarta kalatvang viraktir manashunyata. So the second symptom of someone in whom Bhav has arisen is avyarta kalatvang. They don't waste a single moment. So he stopped me and said, "What does that mean?" I didn't really know what to say. You don't waste a moment. How do you explain that in a deeper way or in a different way? So I just remained silent. And Srila Gurudev said, it means that you don't allow, he said, it means that you use every one of your senses in the service of Krishna. So we might be focusing on our Harinam. If the king of the senses, the mind, is elsewhere, we're wasting our time. If we're applying one of our senses, if we're sitting down and we're honoring Krishna Prasad, but the tongue is enjoying that rather than serving Krishna Prasad, we have a mood of enjoyment, we're wasting our time. So Srila Gurudev explained, Avyakta Kalatvang means using all of our senses continuously in the service of Krishna. Oh, I wanted to say something that I forgot, which is coming back to Tattenu Kampang, Susamikshamano. How Srila Gurudev, this was something that struck me. He was so kind and loving always. And in the final weeks and months, physically in this world, that seemed to just increase and increase. So I'll say from my own character as a conditioned soul in this world, if I'm in any discomfort or pain or inconvenience, I'm not the most pleasant person to be with. We in this world, when we're in a situation like that, we can become frustrated, ill-tempered. Srila Gurudev was nothing like that. So kind and gentle and loving. And he began to express his gratitude to the devotees around him. So devotees would come in. I remember Ramesh Prabhu came in, offered his pranam, and then left. And Srila Gurudev, from the corner of his eye, saw that recognized that this was Ramesh Prabhu who had just come in and who was leaving. And he said, I can never repay him. Srila Gurudev, and he expressed his indebtedness to anyone who had helped him in his mission to his own spiritual master and to Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I don't know if any of you have seen Srila Gurudev's passport. If you wish, I can share it with you. Srila Gurudev's passport, it lists as his father, Param Gurudev, Srimad Bhaktivedanta, Srimad Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Goswami Maharaj. When Srila Gurudev was born in 1921, he joined the Math in 1946. In 1947, he was given Diksha and Harinam and Diksha. In 1952, Sannyas. 1952 Sannyas. Srila Prabhupada later accepted Sannyas in 1959. So when Srila Gurudev arrived at the Math in 1946, he said to his spiritual master, our Param Gurudev, all my love and affection for my family, for my wife, for my daughters, for anything that is dear to me, I offer here at your lotus feet. Tears came to Param Gurudev's eyes. He had never heard someone say something like that. So, complete example, right from the very beginning of Gurave Namaha. Srila Gurudev, in his absorption in that final Leela of his, sometimes he would say things that were quite unusual. So he would say, oh, this Paitagaon is so beautiful. Or this other place is just the most beautiful, like that. And, or he would call out for, he would ask, you'd be looking for something, some particular spice for his internal seva. Someone like me, I can't understand, but it was clear that our Srila Gurudev was immersed in his deep inner life. We sometimes say a Vaishnav at the end of his physical presence in this world returns to Nitya Lila, but that's incorrect. Those are just words. A Vaishnav like Srila Gurudev is always present in Nitya Lila. In Jagannath Puri, the devotees took him out to Srila Gurudev out on a balcony to the ocean. And at Chakratirtha, the waves just come in. You can see them. It's very beautiful. They're coming in continuously. And one devotee who was next to him, Srila Gurudev said, you see these waves that are coming in. Can you count those ocean waves? How many waves are coming in? The devotee said, they're coming in continuously without end, Srila Gurudev. They cannot be counted. And then Srila Gurudev confided, I'm feeling this way. Moods of devotion to Sri Radha and Krishna and of affection to all of the devotees. They're coming in like one wave after another. Srila Gurudev was always fragrant, naturally fragrant. I have a red sweater that I would wear at that time. And sometimes holding Srila Gurudev or helping him by carrying him, that sweater would touch his transcendental body. For years, that sweater has the smell of sandalwood mixed with champak flowers. Srila Gurudev was waiting for the time that he would choose to leave this world. And we were very worried early on because Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj and Srila Trivikram Goswami Maharaj left on the same day. So we thought that on that day, our Srila Gurudev would leave also. When that day passed, there was some sense of relief and hope. But we forgot, certainly I forgot that Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj's appearance day, Abhibhav Titi was on the horizon. And on that day, that particular day, at the time of Naisha Lila, Srila Gurudev's nighttime Radha and Krishna's night pastimes, Srila Gurudev left this world physically. At around 3 a.m., he would always become very restless. And I remember wondering whether that was always a very difficult time. And on that particular day, Srila Gurudev left. I don't know if, I'm sure you all know that Srila Gurudev would honor the Vyas Puja of Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj every year. And Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj also would honor the Vyas Puja of our Srila Gurudev every year. So this was Srila Gurudev's final Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj that he chose to leave on that particular day. When Srila Gurudev first came in 1946 to Navadvip, he arrived at the train station not having told anyone that he would be coming. And in the night, as he exited the train, wondering where he would go, not knowing how to make his way to where Param Gurudev was, there was a lantern, that someone carrying a lantern, calling out, "Hey Tiwariji, hey Tiwariji." And that was Sri Sajan Sevak Brahmachari. That was Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj, who took him to our Param Gurudev. So Srila Gurudev's birthplace he would say, Srila Gurudev would say that his birthplace is Navadvip Dham, and that his father is our Param Gurudev. And that is where Srila Gurudev entered into Samadhi at his birthplace. And just as Sri Sajan Sevak Brahmachari took him by the hand to the lotus feet of his Srila Gurudev, in the same way, Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj took Srila Gurudev, I will say, back into the pastimes, but Srila Gurudev is always in the pastimes of Sri Radha and Krishna. Srila Gurudev went to 3 tirthas at that time. He went to Govardhan, then to Jagannath Puri, where he left us this world, left us physically, at Chakra Tirtha, the place of great separation. And then he traveled to Sri Navadvip Dham for the final ceremony for our eyes and our continued worship over the decades and centuries to come. I'll stop here. There's just so much to say about Srila Gurudev. I want to ask all of you for your kindness. I know how dear all of you are to Srila Gurudev. And in listening to the recordings of all of the offerings that you, the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, have given, have made, I feel so much inspiration. And I want to ask all of you to, if you in some small corner of your heart have any feelings of kindness towards me, then I am sure by that, one day I will be able to truly please my Srila Gurudev. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo. Srila Gurudeva ki jai. Srila Bhakti-Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Srila Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Sundar Gopal ki jai. Thank you so much. I don't really know where to start to appreciate your glorification. It was extraordinarily moving. You took us through so many different experiences. I was kind of on my edge of my seat, pretty much. Actually, I haven't got a seat, on the edge of the floor, pretty much continuously. It was very, very emotional, actually, and very, very deep. I remember one thing, just to sort of emphasize one of the points you were making about Srila Gurudev's dedication to Seva and his one-pointedness, was that he once said he never ate anything in his life. He only ever honored and served prasadam, which I thought was quite an extraordinary statement just in itself. Well, you certainly, what I said at the beginning, that combination of tattva and ras, the combination of intellect and heart, you certainly encapsulated that in your sharing. And I thought you brought Malati Didi's glorification nicely into emphasis with your focus on Gurudev's great work, which is to remind us and to emphasize the essence of the goal of bhakti. And I remember from my own development, when I came to Bhakti Yoga in 1996, unlike you, I wasn't born a devotee, so I was 25, 26 when I met Srila Gurudev. I just learned the Maha Mantra. But somehow he had this genius, this Hradini Shakti, where he could fire this arrow of this, what was a very nebulous goal, into my heart of Anyablasta Sunyam. And somehow he fired that into my heart, that Manjari Bhav, a total clueless fool of the highest order. But yet he shot it into my heart, and it unfolds as a revelation for my entire life. So it's quite extraordinary what a teacher he is. And and that he can teach really the most foolish and the most ignorant right from the beginning, starting always with the goal in mind. And that you can apply in so much in life, actually, always starting with the goal in mind.